Let's call this meeting to order of the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency for April 10th, 2019 at 9 a.m. Director Tresson, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Okay, let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let the record reflect that 4 board members are here and present, and Director Cox is here via telephone. Okay? And at this time, before we go into public comment, I'd like to have a moment of silence here for Oz Butterfield, who passed away March 20th. And Oz was the first general manager of this plant, and served as a director from when before me, and for his dedicated service and everything. We just wish the family, the best. And Oz, we want to honor you as the time served and what you've done for this agency. So I'm going to ask for a moment of silence here. Okay, thank you. It's always when somebody passes away and, you have a moment to remember him by. I just think of all the time. It's such a short period, for what he did for the agency in both roles as a general manager and as a board of director, plus his name being on the street out here. So anyway, let's go on to the items present. We have public comment. Any person wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Keep comments down to 5 minutes or less. So let's open the public comment section. Okay, hearing no public comment, I will close the public comment section and go to item 3, professional achievement awards and anniversaries.
Good morning, President Lewis and directors. I would like to speak about some employees that are receiving awards, safety suggestion awards for the first quarter of 2019, as well as one anniversary. And for any employee that is receiving an award, if you would please stand for acknowledgement by the board. Paul Shells. His safety suggestion was to install a NEMA-rated enclosure for the Powell valve and scrubber system battery backup in the chlorine building. Thank you, Paul. Chewy Sarate. Chewy suggested that we install a guardrail and handrail by the door of Building 27, affix signage in Building 24 that reads "for equipment only," and instruct staff to use smaller hatches to access the pipe gallery, and change the routine service list to include placing first aid kits in the vehicles. Thank you, Chewy. Jim Redmond. Jim suggested that we place a guard the lifting plates on the roof of Building 31 and install an emergency shut-off switch for the new hydronic heating boiler. Thank you, Jim. Robert Holmes is not here today, but Robert's suggestion was to separate the dryer vent from the natural gas line and train employees to only add fuel to a generator or other gas-powered equipment when it is off. So thanks to Robert, who's not here. Scott Fleming. Remove and replace life safety ropes when they exceed their 10-year life cycle. Remove and replace the bowed grating on the roof walkway from the digester roof to corridor 6D, and assign 2 radios with a sign-in sheet to the front desk in the lobby for contractors or agency staff when needed. Thank you, Scott. Ryan Schultz. Remove door stops, which are trip hazards in Building 81, and lock access doors for the switch gears with exposed live busing in Building 81. Thank you, Ryan. Dean Haynes, I don't think Dean needed today, but install an earplug PPE station at the entrance to the generator room in Building 81 and label all electrical vaults as combined spaces. Thank you, Dean. Jaime Garcia, install 2 gas cylinder storage cages in the warehouse. Thank you, Jaime. And myself, add signage to the front entrance regarding pets in the facility. And separately, we also have a 1-year anniversary, which is Richard Palante, with his 1-year anniversary in April this month. Thank you, Richard.
On behalf of the Board of Directors here, I'd like to thank all of you who made those safety suggestions in making this plant a safer and better operational space to work in. The dedication and extra effort that you've shown is appreciated by this Board of Directors.
And I would just like to add one more piece of information. The safety committee members that vote on the safety suggestions and/or hear all of the safety comments, each department at TTSA is represented by a person from each department, and the representation is voluntary. And those people are, for the Administrative Services Department is Michelle Mackey. Operations is Michael Peak, Brandon Diamond, and Kristen Davis. Maintenance Department, Richard Palante and Dean Haynes. IT, Kevin Woods. And engineering and safety is Jay Parker, Aaron Carlson, and Mike Smith. So thank you to all of those folks also.
All right. Thank you, Vicki. Okay. Well, let's move on here, and let's go on to consent calendar. We have items on the consent calendar, 1 through 4. Do we have a motion for approval, or do we want to pull any specific item off for further explanation?
Approval.
Director Wilkins makes the move of approval. Director Northrup seconds it. Any further discussion?
Just comment that I can see the changes that have been made by the finance staff and the financial statements and other stuff. And the new reporting is really good. And LaRue's conveyed to us the efforts that have been taken, and so I applaud the work, and the end product is definitely a step, definitely many steps in the right direction. So good work, Rochelle and your staff.
The financials just make it so much easier to read right now and go right through it and pinpoint certain areas of concern that we should be looking at, and just makes it a lot easier for us to take a look at, as well as anybody from the outside to take a look at it. So I want to commend you on that work that you have done. So
I'll be sure to pass that on.
great. So we have a roll call.
Dale Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Trisson,
Yes.
and President Booth.
Yes. Okay, so that being approved, we're going to go on to the regular agenda. And I'd just like to say, too, with having reviewed the recording of the last board meeting, this looks like we made the suggested improvements. So hopefully now when this goes out, it'll be a lot clearer to the public, so they can zoom in when they go to TTSA's site, and if they have specific interests in certain items, they'll be able to identify them and watch how we resolve them or not resolve them. Okay, so with that, let's go on to presentation of the sewer connection fee study. HDR Sean.
Good morning, President Lewis and Board of Directors. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is our presentation on the final fee study that we put together for the connection fees. This incorporates all the prior discussions, and I'll walk through this. fairly brief presentation, but we'll spend a little time going through the specifics of the residential approach as well as the non-residential approach. So I'll start off with a quick overview, review of our past discussion, and then talk about the summaries and conclusions. And really, just as a reminder, what is a sewer connection fee? Really what it does is it establishes that reasonable relationship between the infrastructure and capacity available in the existing system to meet the demands of new customers connecting to the system. It can also be applied to existing customers that are upsizing, so a bookstore changes to a restaurant. There's also different applications when that is going to come into play as part of it. It's required of all new customers connecting to the system, so this is a one-time fee that customers will pay. This isn't an ongoing fee. Remember, it's when they first connect to the system or change their capacity demand requirements as part of that. As part of the legal requirements, as we go through this process, we establish what that maximum or that ceiling fee can be, and then it's a board policy on what that level is set at for the district. And it's really based and comes back to your specific planning criteria, the value of the capacity in your existing system, and how we compare that to an equivalent unit, which in this case, we've come back to 200 gallons per day per equivalent unit. Now that ties nicely back when we start looking at the non-residential structure. It really talks about how that 200 gallons equates to number of seats, number of fixtures. That's what we essentially apply that analysis to. So this is the summary of where we calculated. If you remember, we had an existing plan fee. This is in dollars per EDU of $5,799. That's for that infrastructure and the value of the capacity that's in the system today. So that's what we're looking at right here where we're sitting in this area, the plant, I should say, not this building. All that infrastructure that is being used to provide capacity. And then we had some, a little bit, $423 per EDU for future plants. So that was a proportion of future improvements that would provide additional capacity when you upsize or replace infrastructure on the system. So the total fee is that maximum fee that we calculated is $6,222 under the replacement cost approach for this. Now that compares to your existing fee of $5,000. And if you remember back to October, we talked about what you could do with that fee, and we had a good discussion during that presentation of what's going to happen here at the plant. What are the future needs that are going to need to take place to provide capacity? How much capacity is available? What does that look like? And so at that point, what we came back to was a recommendation to maintain that existing fee, but start looking at alternatives that the board could consider to adjust the fee based on house size or living unit size to look at what the Mountain Housing Council have provided as some of their recommendations for the area. And so that's where we went in December, is we came back with a few alternatives for the board to consider, still keeping it at the $5,000 level, but then extrapolating from there based on living unit size, whether it's a home or multifamily, and then adjusting some of those non-residential customer components as part of that as well. Out of that discussion, we came back with a couple more alternatives to look at, and so in February, then we came back with 4 alternatives for the board to look at for the residential customers. And ultimately at that time, the board directed us to move forward with option 3A, which set a minimum charge per fee, plus a square footage charge for all square feet of the property, of the building property that we were looking at. So what that looks like, a little small here. But this is, I left the 3A up there, that goes back to that February meeting, that was the one that we landed on. And we have a minimum per living unit charge of $1,500. And then we have a per square footage charge of $1.75 for all square footage of that building. So that was the basic approach. And then we also talked during that meeting about additions, not ADUs, and ADUs. And so what we came back with on the addition piece, if it's greater than 500 square feet, it'd be $1.75 per square foot. Less than 500 square feet, there would be exempt. There would be no additional charge for that. That was that discussion we had. Very similar on the ADU. If a connection charge applies for the ADU, then it would be the $1,500 plus $1.75 per square foot.
Director
Yes.
Cresson?
And just a point of clarification, we classify them as ADUs, but there's also a subset that's just second residential units. I guess that falls into the residential, the top, that can be a second residential unit on a property as well.
I would think so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And then on the ADU, it's, again, 500 square feet or less is exempt. And so as you look at that, the bottom chart here, the tall bar, that's our single-family extra large, that is the 10,000 square foot home. And then as you go to the left of that, we have our large home at 5,000, our medium at 2,000, and our small at 1,200. You can see how that varies from the red horizontal line, where it's the current fee of $5,000. So those smaller homes, or medium to small, can be at or below where we're at today with the $5,000. On the multifamily, you can see they're all below that based on the square footage assumptions of that. So again, if you ended up with a multifamily, a condo that was, 5,000 square feet, they pay that same component, but these assumptions show that it'll be something less. So again, the board's direction trying to come back to the overall Mountain Housing Council recommendations and how to develop these fees for different customers. Any questions on the residential side?
Director Trustin?
Sean, how many other agencies are you aware of that have adopted connection fees similar to this?
A handful, but
Okay.
I'm getting questions about it all the time.
Okay,
And it's been a good discussion like we all had the first time of how do you go about determining where you draw the lines? How do you develop, do you base it on square footage? Do you base it on fixture units? There's been a lot of talk about that right now because the Mountain Housing Council recommendations, we're seeing that in a lot of other areas. Where they're looking at, it could be a variety of things. A lot of times it's housing costs and it's workforce housing, just like you're dealing with here. It's the people that work in the city or town or area can't afford to live where they work. And so these types of discussions are happening more and more frequently now with utilities, especially on the up and down the West Coast. Get to the middle of the country, it's a little different. East Coast is kind of getting there with how they're trying to look at it as well.
And this meets the, AB 1226, the Senate bill?
It does, because what we're doing is we're coming back and establishing a fee, the $5,000 in this
Correct.
case, which is based on, it's not the maximum fee, but we can support that level of the fee. And then when we start extrapolating to different unit sizes, we are tying it back to a reasonable approach. And that's really what we're talking about, because when you look at the California Government Code section on this, it talks about it not being mathematically exact, but it has to be reasonable, and that's what we're trying to show here as part of that. And we're not shifting costs from one customer to another arbitrarily. If you're not a large home size, you're not gonna pay that size, and we didn't bump you up because somebody else isn't paying. That's really what we're trying to get at, is to make sure there's a relationship between what they're paying and the services they're receiving.
Okay.
I've had some folks where, like in a city where you have a water and sewer utility, they've actually been able to tie it back to the actual consumption on the water side and tie that in. That's a little different for you. You've got 5 different agencies that you'd have to try and figure out what consumption is for a specific type. And so at this point, probably not feasible. At some point in the future, maybe something that you could do to refine this. But there's other ways that people are looking at this as well, but doing the same basic approach.
Okay.
So on to the non-residential. Then we've maintained, for the most part, the current structure. And the way this works is, again, this is still based on the $5,000 fee. But it's extrapolated based on the estimated flows per unit. So if we look at motel without kitchen or hotel unit, it's based on the number of units. And that fee is $2,500. Essentially what that's saying is each unit is half of an equivalent dwelling unit. Since the fee is $5,000 and it's $2,500. We do the same thing as you come down to restaurants and bar, the second darker blue. It's number of seats. It's $500 per seat. So again, that is based on the relationship between the estimated flow per seat of a restaurant and the 200 gallons per day to equate to our $5,000 fee. So these are all based on estimates of flow, trying to come back and tie this back to it. So as we go through this, We've maintained it all the way down to the second white area there, where you see the red on the side that says new category. That's a dump station. That's something we wanted to add in, the RV dump station where somebody set that up. You did not have a current fee, and so we can come back and calculate what that will be as part of that. So that's one equivalent unit, fee of $5,000. The next one is a assembly hall. Its number of seats. It's $50 per seat. Again, based on what those assumptions are per seat for these types of facilities. And again, really, it's a replacement of an existing category that you have. This was theaters and churches and other, and we've come back to try and refine that language a little bit to capture everything we're trying to look at as part of that. Other commercial stays the same on fixture units. When we get down to pools and spas, we've bifurcated this a little bit further as well. And so we've established a minimum for a pool or a spa, and then we've established an overage based on the way you currently looked at that. So for a pool of a minimum up to 72,999 gallons, it's 1 EDU or $5,000 for the fee. And then for every gallon, per 1,000 gallons over 72,999, then it's a fee of $68, and that's based on the relationship on a per 1,000 gallon basis for the additional gallon in the pool. Same with spas, and the same approach, a minimum and then a per 1,000 gallon charge. The per 1,000 gallon charge is different. And the reason that it's different is the estimated flows from spas versus pools is different. And so it's based on that equivalent impact for those. So it's $68 for a pool, it's $27 for a spa. That's essentially that relationship on an equivalent basis for those.
Dr. Tresson.
I don't have any real issues at all. I think that all makes sense. I'm just curious, the application of this. So there's existing dump stations in the district, and they are probably charged under sort of a other category that may or may not have, were they all, right now that dump station is equivalent to one residential unit. Are the existing dump stations out there currently equivalent to the, they all come out with their other units there, are they also equivalent to one residential unit? So there's no, and my concern was, you know, if they weren't, then there'd be a change in their user fees going forward, but this is gonna have no impact on the customer's user fees, despite the fact that we're changing connection fees. There's not gonna be a impact rolling forward on
Is a
user
dump,
fees. That's
is,
great.
is a
Okay.
dump station, suppose like in an RV park, let's go to a specific example over in Coachland. Okay, is one where one mobile home is hooked up to a sewer collection, is that one dump station?
No,
Okay,
no.
Those are,
what are those classified as?
We have classifications for campsites with sewer and without sewer connections. When we're referring to dump stations, it is an equivalent to what's been charged historically. It was a request by staff to have a new category. Moving forward, it was easier for them to assess a charge for it.
Okay,
So though that dump station type of connection is specific to just a standalone unit where RVs can come in, hook up, and discharge their tanks.
but these, I mean, it doesn't traditionally fall into a campsite because these are full-time residents. So what would a person that had an RV in Coachland, it's permanent, what's their fee?
So there are campsite, there's a definition of campsite into the amount of tenure of occupancy. So when it reaches a certain percentage, it does fall into the category of a residence. So if you have a mobile home that's permanently fixed, that has skirting,
Right.
it is assessed as a
Residential?
residential, yes.
But if that unit, I mean, a lot of those units, I mean, what we're looking at coming in as far as, I've talked to a couple different people that they're converting these old mobile home parks and putting those mini homes on those, getting rid of the old trailers and bringing these new units in. And they're usually less than the 500 square feet. how would they be assessed?
So theoretically, if they are already connected to sewer, they would not be assessed this charge.
Okay.
Unless they're exceeding what they paid in the past. That's where it gets tricky, because who knows if they paid? I mean, it could have been years and years and years ago when they connected to the
Correct.
system.
So they're grandfathered in?
Essentially,
Okay.
yes. So if it's not brand new,
Okay,
there would be no fee unless they were adding something larger. So if they were taking out those RV parks, et cetera, and building a building there, that's when the district would have to look and say, okay, what are you adding to capacity here? You know, what are you putting here? Is it a bunch of restaurants? There's probably gonna be an additional
Right.
fee. Bunch of tiny homes? Probably not, because it's gonna be, you know, equivalent or less flow than what they've already assumed and established on the
so as
system.
long as those people are paying their service fee on connections that are not utilized, and then they decide, okay, I'm gonna put a tiny home on that piece, as long as they've been paying their service fee, then that would be no additional cost to that operator of the park. But if they decide to, if they didn't have that fee and they wanted to go and put a 400 square foot tiny home on that piece of property, would that be then, how would that be
I
classified?
think
Would
it
that
would
be
be
a?
exempt, because it would
Okay.
be less than the 500 square feet.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I just want that clarification.
And this is where it gets tricky.
Right.
We've worked with utilities to kind of try and outline the policies on, you know, what's redevelopment, what's, you know, changing the capacity, and it's a challenge because you don't always have all the information going back to when those sewer customers connected. You don't know if they really paid, and we're really seeing that in areas that are getting a lot of redevelopment. And essentially, the board or councils have just had to draw a line and say, okay, here's our policy.
Right.
And we'll make exceptions or changes, but.
I just
here's what it
want
is.
this to be black and white, so staff doesn't have that gray area that they have to make the determination.
Exactly.
As long as we have that, then it's far easier to implement. Because don't forget, all 5 member districts are doing the collections for us. And we have to have a policy that we can implement that's black and white, so that we don't confuse those member agencies in the collection of the fees, and it's equal across. One agency's doing the exact same, all agencies are implementing it exactly the same, and there's no discretion.
Yep, absolutely agree. Yeah, and I know some of the other member agencies are looking at how they may revise their collection side fees to try and look at this as well, to try and provide that same kind of, you know, on the prior slide here, to show that same kind of piece with their collection system connection charges as well. And so that's one reason, why we have some of these categories, is to try and make it a little more specific for staff here at the district and as well for the other agencies, so that it is more black and white, as you stated, as part of that. And I think the key piece is really looking at, is this a new connection?
Mhm.
Does it fall, you know, whether, on non-residential, it's usually pretty easy if it's a new connection or not. It's really on the residential side where, okay, is it an ADU, yes or no? Is it greater or less than 500 square feet? That's where there may be a little more back and forth between the district, the agencies, and the customer, but that.
Well,
needs to be figured
this
out.
district has to implement that policy, and that policy needs to be, as I said, black and white, so a member district doesn't have to make that determination.
Agreed.
And there's fairness across the board.
Yep.
And that's, you know, that's why I brought that up, because on the other newer items, I don't think there's much of a financial impact on those other ones at all, but I think this is something that's gonna be coming forward more so as, you know, especially on the housing council, that they wanna see, and that we be able to implement that equally across the board.
Yep.
Director Tresson.
So creating new classifications of customers, these dump sites is a new category, the
Assembly Hall.
car wash and the private and boarding schools for connection fees, but we're not adjusting user fees. So are the people who are coming into these new categories, new customers coming in, new categories, are they still lumped into sort of old categories as far as the user fee goes?
Correct.
Because there's no corresponding new category in the user fee, so they're still getting bracketed in and put in an existing category. The dump station falls into whatever it was previously for that, okay.
That is correct.
And
Okay,
that's not uncommon. That happens, just the timing. You know,
Right.
a lot of folks don't want to do the rate study and a connection study at the same time. It's just a lot of work.
Okay.
And it can be overwhelming. So as you move forward, then you can look at those different categories, and ideally, the equivalency factors that we've used here for the connection fees, are they going to come over and apply
Right.
to the user rate side of it? John?
Yeah, I have a question. On the new additions, do you work with the counties involved so you get a set of plans so you know what the fixtures and square footage, et cetera, are?
Yep, exactly.
Because otherwise it could slip by, which
Yes.
some have in the past.
Absolutely, and that is a challenge of these fees, but that's ideally where the district will get, and other agencies will get a lot of that information as those planning processes are going on, plans are submitted, et cetera, that information will be used then to establish the fee.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
President Lewis?
Let Director Wilkins go, then Director Cox, you can follow.
Okay, thanks. Probably a question for LaRue. With a, let's say there's a residence that was built in the 70s, probably before connection fees were established at TTSA. And let's say it burns down and the lot sits vacant for 5 years, and then someone wants to come in and rebuild on it. Do they have to pay connection fees again, or are they grandfathered in?
For a property that old, there is a grandfather clause that we can apply, but let's assume we had one maybe 10 years ago that burnt down and sat vacant. There's a provision in the ordinance that allocates a certain amount of credit towards that property, as well as any other property as there's a change. So if there are no records, we give them a minimum of $2,000 credit, which is the EDU. Let's just say they have a record.
2,000 square feet.
2,000 square feet, sorry, 2,000 square feet. If there's a record that they had a 3,500 square foot home, we would give them the up to 3,500 without a connection fee. Then anything in excess of that would be assessed the $1.75 per square foot.
Okay, and then would the same apply for commercial?
Likewise, whenever you're doing conversions from commercial to residential and back and forth, yes.
Would it
Or
apply
if there
to,
was a commercial development that, let's say, a developer came in, leveled it, let it sit vacant for 5 years, and came back to redevelop after that, whatever use they had established at the time that could be, whatever use they had established that could be documented at the time that it was removed, that would effectively be credited towards their future connection fees.
Correct.
Okay.
so if they built a smaller house
Let me get the check.
on that property that had a big house on it, would they adjust that down, as it were?
No, if they built a smaller property, and we've given them the allocated credit of 2,000 square feet, let's say they had 2,000 square foot home and it burned down, they built a 1,500 square foot home, there would be no assessed connection fee because they've already paid it.
Yeah.
We would not refund and adjust it accordingly.
Yeah, and that's an important point. The connection fee stays with the parcel.
Right.
Connection fees don't move. I sell my house and move around the corner. I don't take that with me. That connection fee stays on that parcel for that physical area, and that's what you look back to as part of it.
Okay. Director Cox, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions here, Sean, and that is, we were talking about briefly about the tiny homes of less than 450 square feet or whatever the minimum is there. And let me just touch on back on Coachland. There is a fair amount of motorhomes and RV coaches that pull in and out of there seasonally. And is there a way that those seasonal customers that just pull in and hook up and pay their rent by the month, and then at the end of either the ski season or the winter season, they reel it in and then pull out. Are they being charged their fair share for the system?
So theoretically, yes, because that Coachland assumably has paid a connection fee. If it was there before connection fees were not, then that is what it is. But they're also paying the user fees. And so that's part of what gets picked up on the O&M. So I would say yes to that question.
Okay.
Okay, then my second question is, for the last few months we've been kicking this, new rate schedule around, and we're becoming very familiar and comfortable with what we've got going on. Is there going to be a series of public hearings where the public will be exposed to this information? How are we going to present this to the public?
Dale, right after we have this presentation, it's concluded by Sean, we will have a public hearing.
Okay, so that'll be like 2 public hearings, one each a month away, and it will be, before we carve this into stone, there will be 2 public hearings?
No, right now we have it slated and scheduled for 1 directly after this agenda item.
You're
Okay,
gonna
so
be
directly
voting on
after
it.
we accept these fees as presented, we'll have 1 public hearing, and that would be it?
Correct.
Director
Jen,
Tresson?
and I just,
Okay.
LaRue had, and Rochelle had each of the member agencies post notice of these public hearings, plus, Dale, the most interested party, the party that typically expresses the most concern regarding a change in connection fees is the CAT organization, the Contractors Association. And LaRue did directly reach out to them. They shared the information with their, I forget the name of the PAC, their local government thing, and so they've had a chance to review this. So I feel pretty comfortable that the major stakeholders involved should be apprised of this. I mean, there's going to be, obviously, it's impossible to communicate this to everybody, but I think we've done really good due diligence in preparation for adopting these changes. I was also going to just kind of
The reason I asked this question is, before we at SQUA, before we do any rate changes or implement any rate changes, we have 2 public hearings. The first public hearing is to, of course, receive public comment and to make any additions or alterations or revisions that deem necessary. And the second public hearing is the actual public hearing where we adopt the proposed new rate structure. And I always assumed that we, in order to be compliant, had to have 2 public hearings.
This is a fee, not a rate.
Correct.
Okay, and that's the biggest difference, Dale. When you're talking about a service fee, you have to go through the compliance period with making sure it meets the 218 requirements, the public hearings. This is a fee change.
I think this is also the 4th time this has been on our agenda.
Yeah, correct.
Correct.
Yeah. It's been on, we've been discussing it 4 different times.
Yes, I understand that,
Okay.
but to let the public know that it is a noticed public hearing. It's something that I thought we had to do in order to be compliant, but obviously this isn't a change of rate. This is
Fee-based.
how would you categorize this?
It's fee-based. It's not a service charge, and it's a completely different category as far as compliance. And I
And Lane, if I could also respond, Dale, this is Dick. This is a notice public hearing in the next agenda item. So we did do the public hearing notice. There will be one public hearing, so we are in compliance with the state law requirements for a single public hearing notice. And then secondly, I just want to confirm that connection charges are not subject to the more detailed procedures in Prop 218 that would apply to a service charge adjustment.
and the
Okay, that gives me my clarity.
Director Trustin?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify Director Wilkins' question about, a structure that burns down and sits vacant for 5 years. I believe TSD and TSA have the same policy where in a situation like that, we often will give the property owner the opportunity to, because they're going to be, if they keep those connection fees, they're going to carry over to the new development, and therefore maybe they don't have to pay any new connection fees. But if they don't want to, they're going to have to pay user fees through that period where there's nothing there. So often we give them the opportunity to abandon those connection fees and therefore not pay any user fees during that period. And then if they come back 5 years and they've decided to save money on user fees by abandoning those connection allocations, then they have to pay at the point of the new development brand new connection fees according to the new schedule. And
Correct.
You guys have the same policy as we do regarding that, right? So
Parcel owners have the opportunity to forfeit some of their capacity. So in that scenario, if you did have one where there were quite a few residential unit fixtures on there and they wanted to convert it all down to one residence, converting from a commercial to a residence, instead of paying all the service charges associated with the higher connections, they would just be charged the service charge for a single-family home, which would be lesser. We would get to an agreement, they would forfeit that capacity, and then say 10 years later, if someone buys that residence and decides to go back to commercial and return to what the old standing was, they would have to pay the difference in connection fees at that point.
So they're notified of that?
That they are aware of that. We do
Okay.
have quite a few individual property owners from time to time enter into those agreements.
It's important because we have to know what our allocation is. I mean, if we have a lot of banked allocations not being used and all of a sudden it comes in, it becomes both a financial impact and an operational impact. Something that was, I think back with the Olson project on the river with those units that had all those foundations. This was brought up to the board 20 years ago, and they're still not built. I don't know if they're still paying the service charges or not, or where the allocation is, but those probably 15 or 20 units there. And similar to, when you come down 80 and you pass that that old motel there that's 15 or 20 units probably. Are those units banked? Are those units going to be a future allocation to the district, or do they have to reapply? How much banked allocation is out there that is not being utilized?
So, kind of raises some interesting policy considerations. So that sounds like implementing rule and procedure type, like what we just talked about in terms of when you can bank your connection fee and when you can't, is probably not codified in this ordinance we would be adopting today. It's probably codified elsewhere.
Correct.
So if we wanted to have a
That
conversation
that's a
about
different
that,
discussion.
we could
Yeah.
have that separate from today's conversation, if we thought
Correct.
it was important. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because I have mixed thoughts on that in terms of if you got a piece of property that you had paid connection fees on, you're no longer using, you're no longer discharging the sewer, and there's a long period of time that's the case. Is it equitable that that person, in order to not have to pay a second future connection charge, that they have to pay user fees for a period of time when they're not actually using the sewer? It's a separate conversation from today. maybe one we want to have at some point in the
Right,
future.
and I think we should set the policy, because each member district has a different policy with regards to this, but that would be a different discussion than what we're doing right now. And I think it's a good discussion to have. So anytime we can make a uniform position for our member districts to implement, it makes it easier on us as far as being police and as far as the member districts, as far as implementing. So maybe we could bring that up.
That is scheduled as one of the next projects, is to revisit our rules and regulations,
Okay,
Okay, good.
where this is kind of tied into it.
okay,
Okay.
thanks.
So Sean, you want to keep rolling?
Yep, I'll follow, so not many changes here, just a couple new categories, couple reorganization, simplification approaches for the non-residential. We also have our industrial/significant users, the SIUs. Again, this only applies to specific customers that are going to be monitored as part of this. And so that's based on that $5,000 per EDU, or the 200 gallons per day. And what you can see is that there's a different charge or different component of the EDU of the charge per EDU for flow, again, based on the 200 gallons per day. COD, based on 805 milligrams per liter, and so on. Essentially what this is doing is capturing those significant industrial users that are going to discharge higher levels of nasty stuff to you that you have to deal with here at the plant. And so that's going to capture that capacity that they're going to take out of the plant at a higher level. So it's really a high strength discussion to capture those customers. So we've got COD, TSS, TDS, TN, TP at different components that reflect those higher components. So as an example, it could be at residential for COD and TSS, but their TP is off the chart. So they're going to pay a higher component of that piece of it as they go through. So that's how it's calculated for those major customers.
And if they have lower concentrations in those kind of denominators, then they're paying less?
It's just a direct EDU calculation. You go through all the calculations there, flow, like Sean had listed up. So there is no more or less. Whatever the value is what it is.
It's just added up for all.
Okay.
Well, what you don't add them, you look at it and you see which is the highest EDU value,
Oh, sorry.
and then that is the governing one. So you have,
I got you.
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right. That, I didn't recognize that it's the maximum
correct,
of those E EDUs.
because depending on the discharger, flow could be the concern, and then a different one, it may be like
Okay.
Sean, the TP, even though they're
Okay.
discharging just a minimal amount.
Yeah.
And Blake, the proposed ordinance that's in your agenda packet has a formula in text that accompanies this table.
Okay.
That explains what we were just outlining.
Good.
So summary conclusions, maintaining the existing fee level. Again, we're updating the implementation of the fee based on a minimum charge of $1,500 plus $1.75 per square foot. Same with additions greater than 500 square feet at that same square footage charge of $1.75. And then anything under 500 would be exempt. ADU, when a connection fee would apply, is the same $1,500 and $1.75. Again, the 500 square feet or less are exempt. And then we've updated the non-residential components, maintaining those equivalencies on the flow. And these fees do reflect, kind of getting back to one of the earlier discussions and questions, these do maintain and reflect the capacity value in your system at this point at the $5,000 level. And so we're simply adjusting how we're collecting that based on the estimated flow from smaller or larger units on the residential side. With that, I'll take any other further questions that the board may have.
Board?
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Dale.
Here several months ago, the board was faced with a situation that popped up in regards to dialysis and the collection of the waste or discharge from a dialysis facility. Where are we at with that? I know it's a little off base, but we are discussing connections and fees. Have we addressed any dialysis questions that we were looking at here a few months ago?
Dale, we haven't seen any correspondence recently. However, as to the connection fee, we do have the SIU equations that would address that. So when that conversation does come back, we'll be able to reference the equations for a charge.
Okay, that sounds good, thank you.
Any other questions? One question, I'm looking at one of the charts that you had in there as far as we have 10 years left on the bond payment for the expansion here, and how 26% of our service charges go to pay that bond charge when we went from 6.2 or 3 to 9 NGD plant. And then that gets paid off. I guess my question would be, and it probably is going to be brought forth in the master plan that Corolla's doing, as far as, you know, the need and the cost as far as the future plant expansion. And, you know, that's going to be giving us a lot better outlook of what that 5,000 number is supposed to be, because, you know, when we first looked at that, we were first looking at, okay, we're going to reduce this fee, you know, yet we're only halfway through that bond payment. I mean, we still have about 25 mil or 2.5 a year to pay off for the next 10 years for that last plant expansion. When the next one takes place, and what percentage of the service charge we feel is appropriate for the next plant expansion. And it all depends on the amount of development we're going to be seeing in the future here, and how we're going to make those adjustments. And I think at this point, by just going off what we have existing is the appropriate thing to do until that additional information comes forth, because we could be having this same conversation within the next, I guess it's about a year and a half till that report gets made. But it's going to be a discussion item that we need to come back to.
Absolutely, and you kind of hit on two key components, one of them being what is that capacity value and growth, what's that relationship, and then the other part is the board policy on what proportion of user rates go into the funding of that additional capacity.
Right.
What we've assumed, as you said, is that 74% is coming from these fees.
Correct.
So we're funding that directly with these fees. And so if the board has a different policy at that point in time, then you would want to adjust this fee based on that policy direction.
Right. This board has always been good as far as being proactive instead of reactive. And I want to continue that basis here with regards to connection fees. Because at different times in the past, we've actually reduced the fee, then we had to increase the fees. And so once we get that other report back, this information that you've presented us, Sean, can be re-implemented and added to as far as that discussion that needs to take place in a year and a half or two.
Correct. Yeah, that master plan will outline those capacities and future projects, deficiencies, et cetera, and that'll play right into updating. You know, when we went back and it was $424, I think, for the future piece.
Correct.
That number could be significantly different.
Correct.
But depending on what the actual real capacities are from that plan and that review, the numerator and denominator could also change a little bit as well. But I'm guessing that future piece is what's going to change the most.
Okay. Board, any other? Yeah, Director Trustin.
Yeah, on the summary and conclusions page, everything seems consistent with the last discussion we had, except for one item that I just wanted to make sure that we're all, on the same page with, and that's the exemption from connection fees for ADUs less than 500 square feet. I know that we said additions to homes less than 500 square feet sort of at that de minimis level, consistent with, I think, what Dan, you said the town does. But I thought, I wasn't clear that on new residential units, call them an ADU or a second unit, that we were going to waive connection fees based on a de minimis number, that those were gonna be charged, the fee regardless of the, size of that, and I just, you know, that,
There's probably two variations on that. So one would be if someone is doing a 400 square foot addition to a home to put in a kitchen and a bathroom so that the downstairs could now become a second unit. Like that's one potential scenario. Another scenario is someone decides to do a in-law unit that's like detached, new structure that's 450 square feet on the same parcel. And I could see, you know, those two scenarios we might want to look at differently, or we could
well,
look at the same.
the first scenario, I think, would automatically fall into the exemption by law. If they're retrofitting something inside their existing footprint of their building, we can't charge them connection fees, even if it's 1,200 square feet, so long as the main house is double that.
Right.
That's
So there's
what-
already
that's what-
laws that exempt us from that.
But that's with no addition.
Right.
Right.
So that's within the.
Say a
existing-
guy has a garage and he has a unit on top of it that was storage for the longest period of time. He hasn't started, there's no new construction, but now he wants to change the use of it and make that a unit. There's nothing, we have to comply.
That
with-
one's
So there's
exempted
certain,
by law.
yeah, there's certain ADUs that are gonna be exempt from connection fees no matter what. So in looking at this one, we're gonna ignore that. These are obviously ADUs that would not be exempt, but we're saying that, hey, the ADUs that aren't exempt, so they're new structures, less than 500 square feet, we're gonna exempt them. They've got the kitchen, they meet the requirements of a second residential unit or an accessory dwelling unit because they're small. If they're less than 500 square feet, we're gonna consider that, you know, no connection fee associated with that. I wasn't sure that that was where we were going, and I just wanted to make sure we, you know, we're all comfortable with that. I don't know that, you know, materially is gonna affect the finances of the organization, nor it certainly leans in the direction of the Mountain Housing Council, where we're encouraging particularly small units and incentivizing them even more so. So it just wasn't exactly what I was expecting, to see that 500-foot exemption on
Were
the
you-
ADUs.
Were you expecting always a 15, if it's less than, say, 500, that they would pay that minimum 1,500, and then there wouldn't be any charge for square footage?
If it was a new residential unit, call it an ADU or
Right.
not an ADU,
On the same
it
piece of
was gonna,
property?
on the same piece of property, it would be subject to the 1,500 plus $1.75, regardless of its size. Unless, the only place that wouldn't occur is the exemptions under law for accessory dwelling units, you know, that are incorporated into existing structures and all the rules that are sort of built into that. So we're adding an additional incentive for, you know, somebody putting a mini home on their property,
Correct.
parks it there, and it's under 500 square feet, probably still charge them a user fees, but there'd be no connection fee for those. And I know that we were doing that for the additions, because an incremental addition to a home without new residential kind of kitchen facilities and all that, we didn't want to nickel and dime, you know, small additions, and we kind of chose 500, but a brand-new residential unit
On the same
maybe,
parcel.
yeah, maybe wasn't the same thing. And again, I'm not necessarily opposed to that, it's just
Yeah.
a little different than what I thought we had discussed, and wanted to make sure we're all at least recognizing that and saying, yeah, we're doing this because, you know, in effect, we're, you know, taking an extra step towards, you know, encouraging installation of these units.
And don't forget, they are paying a service charge.
They would
full
say service,
The
yeah,
175
they're not exempt
by
from the
annual. Yeah.
service fee.
Let me, I'm curious just about a detail with that. With that scenario where there's an existing home on a piece of land and a second small home is
Right.
added,
It's less than 500.
it's less than 500 square feet. would that typically plumb into the existing sewer lateral, or would there be a new sewer lateral out to the main? Or might it
From
vary?
our member agency, it would depend on the lay of the land. Most likely, it would, it really depends. You know, it depends on where they're siting that home and where their service lateral to serve the main property is.
Yeah,
It would have to connect downstream of the home. It wouldn't flow into the main house. That's one thing we would not allow. It would have to have a sort of independent connection, but where between the
Yeah.
house and the property line that happens is,
and the reason I ask, just, you know, it's a connection fee, so if you're plumbing into your existing lateral, is it different than if you're creating a new connection? You know, a new connection, you know, you've got one connection to the main versus two, and maybe it doesn't matter
Well,
from
from-
a flow standpoint.
from
but
TTSA's standpoint, you know, they don't
Probably
maintain
doesn't
those
matter.
laterals. Anyway,
It
from the
doesn't matter.
member
That's
agencies,
up
that's a
to the
good
district.
question.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were trying to kind of follow, Dan, I think, consistency a little bit with the town in
Yeah.
terms of that 500-foot exemption. But if someone was to build a 500 square foot tiny home or something like that as a second unit on their property,
It would actually pay the fee with the town.
there would be, the impact fees would be associated with that. It wouldn't be considered a 500-foot addition and therefore exempt.
It's a new structure,
Right.
yeah, it's not an addition, so.
So, it's, I
It
just,
is what it is.
I just
yeah.
want to, you know, I just want to
Clarify.
clear that, you know, we're providing that and, you know, I mean, whether that's, I don't know, these tiny homes are popular and I don't know that the TTSA waiver of a, you know, $1,500 plus another $1,000 is gonna, you know, generate a ton of interest in people parking these on their properties.
The tiny
Uh,
home would be one issue. The other issue is, like you said, if you have a separate 500 square foot, less than 500 square foot house, no matter what, under the new building codes, you're gonna have to still sprinkler that thing and have, you know, I mean,
Right.
it becomes an issue. You know, whereas, say there's a 3,000 square foot house and a guy wants to build less than you know, it'll be a $499 house there. That guy still is gonna have to, it's gonna,
Right.
you know, that's gonna be an impact in itself.
You know, and potentially, just as we move towards 2 agenda items from now, when we're
Right.
actually taking action on the ordinance where this is codified, you know, we have the opportunity to potentially pass the ordinance if we see a spate of these 500-foot units coming in and it starts to materially affect things, we can always change the ordinance and say, you know what,
Yeah.
we're gonna get rid of that exemption because, you know, it's having negative consequences on the organization, or there's some equity issue out there, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, I mean, we are setting it in stone, but that stone can be,
Moved.
yeah, changed.
Well, it says,
We'll be
it says
revisiting this
here,
thing after that.
ordinance of 1/2019, adjusting agency connection charges and making related amendments, which I assume that includes that, right?
Well, that's if we
Yeah.
wanted to make an amendment change right now, but the other thing, don't forget, I mean, this is a good period, this is a great start, great information, but in a year and a half or so, we're gonna be revisiting it, and we can see those impacts and
Okay.
see what happens. I mean, it
Yeah.
is somewhat temporary, but it's a good opportunity, and we've discussed it, and I
Yeah.
think we can implement this and then see how it works. And in that period, the next period of time, about a year and a half, 2 years, we need to come back and take a look at the long-range thing, because then we'll have a better idea as far as connections, the plant capacity, when we're gonna go for an expansion. I mean, all those questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it either way. The logic that was used for the traffic impact fee program that I was involved with at the town when we went to a cost per unit to a cost per square foot on this question was that, you know, at minor additions defined as less than 500 square feet, we didn't necessarily want to be chasing those through the impact fee program, but if someone was building a new structure, even if it was a small structure, that was really a different animal. It's like there's a different amount of utility that comes along with that. There's likelihood a different level of impact. There's a higher likelihood that it's going to be used independently from the main structure. And so that was the reason that we exempted additions, but not
Right.
small new structures.
And that, again, that was sort of the direction I thought we were headed, so I was a little surprised to see the exemption for it on ours, and again, we want to adopt this. I don't think it's materially gonna affect the district significantly, but it may be something we want to track, and when we revisit this again, it may be something we may want to change.
Sean or LaRue, do you have any thoughts on this conversation?
I think when the master plan is done, we can come back in a minute for sure. Blake is correct, that is the direction we were going. When we revisited the direction, we went and listened to some video, I mean not video, but audio of the meetings. And if you recall, there was quite a bit of comment, various discussion, individuals speaking, and we were trying to capture exactly the intent. And when we went back to the end, we did conclude that someone had stated, and everybody agreed, that the exemption applied to all developments, ADUs, and square footages for expansions of 500 square feet or less.
Okay,
So,
let's open this up for public comment on this, and then if we're through with the discussion, and then we have the ordinance. So item 2 here is the public hearing to consider the adoption of the proposed ordinance adjusting the agency's connection charges and making the related amendments. Is there any public here that would like to comment on the changes here that are taking place as far as the connection fees? Okay, hearing none, I'll close the...
President Lewis,
Yes, Director Cox.
this would be considered our first public hearing?
This will be considered our only public hearing, after having notified all the member agencies and the CAT and doing the best we can as far as notifying the public about what's taking place. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so we have closed the public hearing, and we will go for item 5.3, approval of ordinance number 1, 2019, adjusting agency connection charges and making related amendments.
I so move.
Director Northrop makes a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Director Wilkins seconds it. Do we have further discussion?
Yes.
Director Tresson?
There was just one section that deals with the implementation, and I say this as much as a board member as a general manager of one of the member agencies. When the ordinance indicates that to make the determination for the square footage and therefore the connection fee for the homes, the property owner, the member agencies need to see, or the TTSA, depending on who does that, not only needs to see the building permit, which indicates the square footage on it, but they also have to be provided with a set of plans that on those plans are also indicated the square footage on it. And I was questioning the value of having duplicate things and the complications that may arise out of that, that it may be easier to amend that one section to require just the building permit from the relevant building agency, and using that and not burden potentially the member agencies or TTSA staff with plans and trying to confirm that the two match up, that we rely on the building permit. The building permits, whether they're from Town of Truckee, or Nevada County, Placer County, and I assume El Dorado County, will indicate the kind of living space in them that's the basis for the square foot value. In that, I think that probably the member agencies of the town have the right to request plans if they want to confirm that, but that the building permit is probably adequate. And I see, in the long run, people are going to come up to speed with this, but as people coming with new homes to our agencies to begin with, they're not used to bringing in plans, those plans don't probably have that, it's gonna create a lot of complications. And the building permit already has the same square footage. We should tie it to that. Having this exterior square footage thing creates the opportunity for us doing a second plan check and a lot of confusion possibly for the homeowners and for our own staff. And so I would recommend that, you know, we adopt the ordinance with the amendment that we tie the square footage to the building permit from the respective
Counties.
county or town. Yeah.
Do you have any?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Lou.
When this was drafted, the intent was to simplify the process to request the plans, so staff, whether it be TTSA or member districts, have to calculate the square footages. After discussions with it, there was concern there could be a duplicate, a conflict if there's then which entity would govern. Going back and having further discussions, we believe that the building permits, as issued by the agency, whether it be the town or the counties, would be adequate, and we are confident with their calculations. So we are in agreement to support such amendment.
Okay.
And Blake used the term residential, which figured something I hadn't even thought about in terms of when we're calculating building square footage, it would exclude garage space.
Correct. This is living square
Living
footage,
space only.
Yep.
as
Right.
defined.
We have a definition of living space here, and it does correspond to what you guys in the town and the counties.
So
it
I
would
don't have-
exclude- It would exclude garages and decks.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
So I don't have to amend my motion?
Correct.
Or do I?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, John, you do. I think there's been a request to amend, and so and to be clear,
Oh,
just so
you're
I'm
right.
also clear, you know, Blake's talking about page 6 of the draft ordinance,
Yep.
subsection B there, the third sentence begins residential development plans shall include, and I believe, like you're talking about striking that sentence? Well, two things. The preceding sentence refers to shall provide with the plan, so we'd be striking in the second sentence, the plans for the development of the parcel. So it just continues with the copy of the building permit, and then we'd strike the third sentence, beginning residential development plans shall include. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I didn't actually fully redline strike it out. That was probably,
Shall include.
which, I mean, you might get rid of the residential development plans and continue that second sentence on with the remainder of that. Shall provide a copy of the building permit issued by the county or town of jurisdictions that shall include the square footage of the, and I might get rid of the exterior perimeter and say,
Living.
include the square footage of the new residential structure or addition, not including carport, covered, or similar area.
Can you just put living square footage?
I think this is okay the way it is, because they don't all say just living. Some of them say residence, and then you don't need that as indicated on the building permit, because we're saying that the building permit needs to include that. So if for some reason staff receives something a building permit that doesn't include it, then that's where staff would then seek, plans or some other way of determining that square footage. So,
And I'm okay with those,
Okay.
with those adjustments.
Okay.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. Is everybody else okay with those adjustments?
Yeah.
You want to amend your motion to include
I
those?
amend my motion to cover that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Northrup, a second by Director Wilkins. Any further comment? Roll call, please.
Gil Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Tristan,
yes,
and President Lewis.
Yes. Okay, with that, approval of ordinance number 1, 2019 is done. Okay. Let's, thank you, Sean, for that presentation.
Thank you all.
Yes.
so can I just make another point?
Go ahead.
So this will go into effect 30 days from now, so that'll be when the new connection fees are charged, so I guess now that it's adopted, encourage
Correct.
TTSA staff to, probably communicate with the various building departments so that people pulling permits, anything you can do to educate the public. I know CAT probably needs to be
Revisit.
told that it's been passed and will be taking effect, but if there's opportunities to reach out and minimize the number of folks who come into the member agencies with $5,000 checks, only to find out that, or even to TTSA if they come down here, that is going to require some public outreach, so,
Okay.
great.
Okay, let's go on to approval to enter into a contract with CNW Construction to perform an administrative building office remodel project.
I
Aaron?
so move.
Well, go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, my name is Aaron Carlson. I'm the senior engineer filling in for Jay Parker today, engineering manager. The administration building office remodel project, the project has gone to bid twice, and both times have not received any bid. Staff would like to thank the board of directors for referrals for contractors, and as a result of these referrals, have received 2 proposals. Staff requests approval to enter into a contract with CNW Construction for an amount of $66,000.
What, I mean, seeing the two bids and double on the other one.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, everything's the same. Okay. Board?
Let's hope that CNW doesn't need rescue.
Yeah.
I'd move approval.
Director Wilkins makes a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Director Northrup makes a second. Do we have any further discussion? Roll call,
Big
please.
difference in the bids.
Okay.
Dale Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes.
and President Lewis.
Yes. Okay, let's go to item 5.5, approval to, thank you, Aaron. Approval to award the 2019 plant concrete repair project. Yeah.
Staff have received 2 bids. The lowest responsible bid was 5% lower than the engineer's estimate of $470,000. Staff recommends award of the project to Q&D Construction totaling $448,643.80.
Okay.
That's the first project I've heard come in to a public agency below engineer's estimate in a long time, so good job.
Yeah, good
I
job.
so move.
Director Northrup makes a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
You're a little late. Director Tresson seconds it. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Dale Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Tresson,
Yes?
and President Lewis.
Yes. Okay, approval to advertise and solicit bids for the 2019 roof repair project.
The initial project, initial budget for the project was $100,000. Would like to note that the engineer's estimate for the work that was included is $460,000. So we've gone a little bit over budget, and that was because staff, upon the review of other roofs, was determined that buildings 4, 13, and 53 should be added to the project due to their condition, due to the condition of the roof. Staff requests approval to go out to bid.
If I could add something.
Go ahead.
So the roof repair project was part of our CIP over the 5 years. The intent was to address this on numerous years. However, since the approval of the budget, we found out that there were more failures in the roof. After discussions with staff and contractors, they've opted and suggested that to repair those roofs now with the intent that it'll hopefully attract more bidders, and because of the volume of work, it could potentially lower the cost. But because of the locations and the patches that we've been doing, sometimes when you patch an area and you get a leak, it's very hard to find out if that patch is working because it could be coming from somewhere else. So the idea is to address it now instead of next year. And that's why you have an overage in the expected budget, and that'll be addressed in the CIPs for next month, or when we adopt those new ones.
Yeah. Because originally that was just one, now it's 5 roofs.
Right, so the scope is, because there's a higher monetary value, the scope of the roofs has changed too. Because there was potentially just gonna have one replacement with a couple patch jobs. But due to the equipment, and we're putting new equipment underneath these buildings now, the best direction is to replace the roof, protect our facilities.
Yep. Do we have a motion?
I
for
so move.
Director Northrup makes that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Director Cox seconds that motion. Do we have further discussion on this item? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dale Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Trisson,
Yes.
and President Lewis.
Yes. Okay, let's go on to approval of TTSA investment policy, item 7. Michelle?
Good gentlemen, Michelle Chavez, Administrative Services Manager. So this investment policy has been amended through the years. The last time we've seen it is in 2017. There are no changes to the existing policy, and as we progress through the master plan and get a better idea of where our fund allocations need to be, we can start looking into it and making changes to the policy accordingly. So staff recommends approval of the existing.
Okay,
So again, this is there's no changes from the 2017, we're just updating it to the current year. Okay.
right.
I so move.
Director Northrup makes that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Director Tresson seconds it. Further discussion? All in favor, roll call?
Dale Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Trisson,
Yes.
and President Lewis.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Discussion and action on funding request from Truckee River Watershed Council. General Manager?
Yes, sir. The Truckee River Watershed Council had submitted a letter to the Board of Directors requesting cost share participation for them to move forward on removing invasive species of plants and weeds within our area. They've historically performed workforce in the past. We've gotten into agreements with them. And this year they're asking that we participate in the amount of $5,000 to assist them in that. Management's recommendation is that we do participate with the $5,000. They've done the work for us historically in the past without cost to us. And I think it'd be a good opportunity for the agency to participate into the community.
I have a question. If they use Roundup, that ought to be against the law. What I use on weeds down south is white vinegar, kills them.
I don't know what they put on there. I do know that when they do apply it, they would provide it with us with a MSD sheet.
Okay, because boy, that stuff's killing people and beans.
I use it all the time.
So, like I said, management's recommendation is that we participate.
Yeah, I'm confident the Watershed Council will be using
The proper.
approved
I would
weed
so.
eradication compounds, so.
Okay, we got a motion for approval?
Move approval.
Director
So
Wil-
moved.
Director Wilkins makes a motion, Director Cox seconds it. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Dale Cox,
Yes.
John Northrup,
Yes.
Dan Wilkins,
Yes.
Blake Trisson,
Yes.
and President Lewis.
Yes. Okay, item 9, discussion and action on video recording of the Board of Directors meetings.
So at the March 13th Board of Directors meetings, we put a camera up, recorded it, and subsequently posted it on our website. After review, I found out that there were some areas of improvement, which were to elevate the camera and to get a better view, install some microphones as the audio wasn't as well as I thought it could have been. So we've made those purchases and made those changes, and wanted to get some feedback from the directors, see if there's any additional changes they might like to do, and if there's any direction on continuing to video and post our meetings on the website.
Having looked at that.
Any positive feedback from the public on the videos?
No, they have an opportunity to provide comment if the board wishes, but we didn't have an item for that.
Yeah,
And no anecdotal calls to admin or anything like that?
No.
Yeah.
I reviewed it last, after the first one. I think we did need to make some adjustments there. Hopefully, this will be enough with the microphone. It wasn't quite clear a lot of times, the audio, and with the elevated camera, I think it'll be better. So I'll take a look at it and see if there's any additional next month. We'll discuss it then.
Yeah, I think we should keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do we need a motion on that, or we're gonna wait till next month?
Would you like me to have another agenda item remain on the, or can we just
From my
proceed?
perspective.
I don't think so, unless there's we could take it up under public comment if there's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to make
Direct.
sure it's accomplishing the intended goal, and that if the person wants to call it up, they can see it and hear the discussion.
Right, if there needs to be additional audio equipment here, if it's not as clear, I would like to see staff have that opportunity to do so, okay? Without having to come
As long
back
as it
to us.
doesn't get too crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay?
Yep.
Okay,
We're
so,
gonna table this?
no,
No, I have direction. I will continue to video record and post to the website, and as feedback comes in, we can make adjustments accordingly.
okay. All right, let's go to management team reports. All right.
Good morning, Board of Directors, President Lewis.
Good
Michael
morning.
Peak, Operations Manager. Operations Department report for March. All plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Operations overall, the plant performed well through the month. Laboratory report, staff performed necessary laboratory testings for WDR requirements and operational needs. You can see the plant data here below, and the following charts for flows and all our effluent requirements. Is there any questions?
pH level at well 30, whatever is
About 6.5 where it's supposed to be for the month, yep.
Mike, do you track, I know that, I think it's one of the Hawaiian Islands where they're questioning, the EPA is questioning whether or not land disposal of,
Supreme Court guidance on this issue, probably not for another
Okay.
year or two.
okay.
But it's a significant issue across the country that's being closely monitored, and we'll just have to sit back and wait for further court guidance unless we hear something from Lahontan in the meantime, in which case that'll be a separate discussion.
And I have not heard anything from
Okay.
on to the,
Okay. Operationally, I've noticed I cross over the bridge daily on the way to and from work, and I saw that, I forget what pond, the westernmost pond
Pond A.
is the line pond, and probably with the snow melt and all that, that there's standing water in it. Do you just let that evaporate over time, or is there a plan to pump it down?
There is a plan to pump it down.
Okay.
Not right now though, because of the flows that are actually coming into the plant, because all the I&I from spring runoff and melt and the rain that
Okay.
we got. As soon as those flows dissipate a little bit, we'll be putting pumps into those ponds. That pond we have to pump with
Can't grab it,
different
yeah.
types of, well, there's no gravity and there's also not a built-in pump. So we
Okay.
take pumps out there and we'll pump it out slowly over time. And then also we'll be checking Pond B, which has pumps, and if that has water in it, we'll pump it back also. So
When you
there's
say
a plan to
pump it, what
back,
do
and
you-
it's all rainwater at this point, we've
Right.
not bypassed those ponds at all, so it is all rain and snow water.
Okay, so you're bypassing the plant with that.
We have not bypassed to those. We will pump back to the plant from those ponds.
Okay. On a low
But it's
flow.
just rainwater and snow
Right.
melt off is all it is.
Okay.
We just don't like to leave it out there for mosquitoes in the spring
Yep.
and stuff like that, so.
Good.
Any other questions?
Any other questions, board? Thanks, Michael. Okay. Richard.
Morning, Board, Directors, and Mr. President. Richard Palante, Maintenance Manager. Again, with the snow and the winter months, construction along with TRI has been slow. We've received no USA Dig alerts to respond to out there. Work order stats, as I mentioned last month, with the snow removal, we were down a little bit. We're back up in the normal range, about 55% of the last month. Highlights for the projects are chlorine leak detection. First phase is completed. That allowed us to install common equipment that's used elsewhere in the plant, so we can limit our stock and have a crossover of spare parts. The installation went well and the product's working very well, so we're moving forward with the second phase, which will be the replacing unit in the chlorinated room. We're working still on the hydraulic boiler installation, which will provide heating in this building, and we purchased that, and we're doing that as an in-house install to save the agency that installation money instead of paying a contractor. It's going well between the Burton staff to do that and work on other repair projects that come up. The other one's a blower installation at B&R. Again, this is a retrofit of the existing equipment, so we're kind of engineering as we go. So we have some more parts on order to do that, see how that blower performs compared to the originals. And then I'd like to highlight the Lucity project kickoff. We have a project manager assigned to us. We've been interfacing with him, giving him some examples of our asset hierarchy. They like that layout, and it fits well within the software. So we are starting the data collection process, which literally means go out and grab every nameplate off a piece of equipment to be 100% accuracy, hopefully. As soon as he returns from some other projects, we're going to start uploading some of that data and trying out different workflows.
Cool. Good. Any questions for Richard?
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Aaron?
Aaron Carlson, a senior engineer. Engineering staff is currently working on a multitude of projects. The first one is the 2019 concrete repair project, the 2019 roof repair project, slowly shifting into the 2019 headworks improvement project. We are winding down building 27 main service upgrade project. We're also starting to fire up the administration building office remodel project. And staff is also working on digital scanning of sewer lines, the multi-use digester pump, the master sewer plan, and with respect to project planning meetings, we're conducting a review on the Avery Hotel.
Board, any questions of
No,
Aaron here?
you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Rochelle? I guess we don't have with Bob, he's not here, so we got any questions for
No
for
questions.
LaRuda? No? Okay, go ahead, Richard.
Rochelle Chavez, Administrative Services Manager. Besides regular business, I just wanted to give staff some credit for all the time that they put in to complete the financial statements, and thank you for your comments earlier as well. I'll be sure to pass that on. They were able to complete a large majority of that work in a small period of time over these last few weeks. Also in the billing department, they have started doing a lot of work with Cassell, so we also have been assigned project managers for each department and several within accounting because there's so many areas to cover. So we've also started transferring data so they can work on structuring the software for us. That has pretty much taken a lot of our time in connection with the connection fee study, so that's really it.
Do you feel that we're going to meet what was the timeline for tax, for this to go into the next fiscal year tax? July.
Yeah, so we have till
Yes.
July to transfer our data. Dick is currently working on proposed public notice and ordinance. So we have to first request a tax code by ordinance or a resolution, I'm sorry. And then once we get a tax code, then we can forward our data along with that tax code and another resolution giving us approval to do so.
Okay. And there again, this is just residential, correct?
We do have some simpler, easy to transfer commercial, but it would be majority residential. So there are a few hundred that we could transfer for commercial. I know previously we had stated only residential or as directed or as we see fit, but with your approval. I know after talking to TSD, they did some early on, but a majority were not done until the second year. There are some that are easier than others that are,
Well, tell me this, when you have two different addresses, where you have the property owner, and I'm thinking commercial, where you have the property owner and the leaseholder is paying that bill.
Right.
So you have two different addresses there. Will you continue that same, will that leaseholder, will his be on his tax? He's gonna pay it individually, right? Okay.
So it's based on whoever is the owner of that property, of that parcel. But those are the commercial properties that have tenant agreements.
Right.
And those are some of the commercials that we would hold off.
Okay,
until
good.
we can do further notice.
All right, I just want to know how that, because that could be a real impact.
Right. That's additional work that's
Yeah.
required. We have some
I
that
don't wanna
are
get nailed.
straightforward, one owner,
Right.
no tenants that we can send
Right.
straight through that won't be.
But when you have it on file, when you have a separate property owner and you have a separate another billing person, you'll learn how to bifurcate those
Yes.
in the next process.
Yes.
Good.
And our new software will make it a lot easier to do that. So right now, it's all manual, separating them out, even though we only have a couple thousand of those. So it's easier to pull, the timeshares or the resorts.
Right. Well, I would suspect that at the time you do that, you'd send notices out to that property owner saying, is this still the billing that you want in place? Or do you want to revert back to you? Okay.
As I understand it, when the property goes to the tax rolls for collection, it will be submitted through the county to the property owner.
Well, right now, I mean, for commercial, okay, I'll give an example of mine. I mean, I'm the property owner, but I have a leaseholder who pays the TTSA bill. And so what I'm saying is there's two, you have two, you got some, I know the property owners, no matter what's in response, but do you have a way to keep the billing to the,
No.
okay, will that come out in the next tax?
Or would we just
For commercial?
Or would we just continue to direct bill the
Tenants.
tenants in those examples?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I think,
We can. We have a handful, larger than a handful of direct bill customers for properties like that, where it's shopping centers, and it's easier, following suit again with TSD, it's easier to direct bill those customers because there are
Right.
so many tenants involved.
Good.
It's too hard, too difficult to split the parcels out and divvy them up by tenant, you can't do that, it has to be the owner, so it's easier to keep those as direct bills and mail them out as we have.
but just in a case like yours, one owner with one leaseholder.
Right.
We would notify you that we're changing you to the tax roll so that you could make arrangements with your tenant to, collect those monies from them as part of your lease agreement, and we would put you on the tax roll. We would not, there's very, very few exceptions where we continue to direct bill tenants. We've tried to move everything over to the county tax roll, but we make notifications so nobody accidentally,
Slips through the cracks.
the tenant doesn't get the bill and you do and you didn't get the money from your tenant. So there's an education process that goes along with that.
Do you have anything to request? I mean, say that property owner requested that
Continue to stay on that.
continue to stay on it? Can that happen?
In very rare examples, I think we do that, but for the most part, we've tried to push everything we possibly can
To the tax.
onto the tax roll. Yep.
The direction I believe we were headed was to move as much to the county tax roll as possible. There are some parcels that we just cannot do so.
Yeah, in an orderly fashion that doesn't, cause confusion with the customers and all that. And that's why you guys aren't, probably your property would not be pushed to the tax roll currently, but I assume at some point you
In
might
the
be
future,
getting a
it
letter
would
from
be,
TTSA notifying you
Right.
with plenty of advance notice to adjust your lease agreement.
Right.
And then it's up to you guys whether you're gonna,
And speaking with council, we intend to have a notification go out soon so that we can have plenty of time for a public hearing and notification several months in advance prior to billing to the tax roll.
Okay, that's for commercial, but right now, for both. I mean, are both gonna go forward? I thought we were just doing residential first and then commercial. Are we doing both at the same time?
We can, but not all. So it has to be phased because of the difficulty of the process.
Okay.
So we can do just residential and hold all commercial, but we do have some commercial that's easier to bill, several hundred that are easier, no
Okay.
tenants involved.
Okay.
So, and then, the more difficult scenarios we can hold.
and just
Go ahead.
to clarify, I don't know, there will be a resolution or an ordinance that we pass to allow us to collect it on the tax roll. Will give the agency the right to collect all user fees on the tax roll, but it doesn't require that you collect all user fees. There's not gonna be a separate ordinance for residential and a separate one for commercial.
Right.
It's just giving the right to collect on the tax roll. And if you wanted to bill one customer for whatever reason, and not only one customer, you could do that. It just, you have the right to do it. It's just,
Oh,
it's a phase-in approach by staff.
And then
But-
we'll list the parcels.
But the ordinance will give them the right to collect as many as they want, both residential and commercial.
Okay.
Yeah, the process will be at your May meeting, there will be a resolution authorizing collection on the property billing and authorizing staff to go through this. And then at your June or July meeting, there will be a report of billing charges that comes to the board. That will be a laundry list of APN numbers and bill numbers that'll include all the residential plus these few commercial without tenants. And the details will be in that report that'll come back in 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, well, it's good because I'm getting, if I have a tenant that's not paying the bill, I get notified also, so I don't think that would, but I'll be the one that's paying the bill and having to go back to my tenant. Whereas the system right now is the tenant pays the bill. And we have quite a few, there are quite a few of those in the commercial core. So there'll be an adjustment for the property owner, so. Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, let's go to, here. Okay, general manager's report.
I've listed some items in here. Only thing I wanted to add on and touch base were to the change order for, change order number 3 for the building 27. As you can see here, it's nothing more than a change in the date. I went ahead and approved that. It's attached for your review. Also, there's an update here provided by Bryce Consulting in regards to the classification and compensation study update. She's listed the steps for each, the classification and compensation, and the status where they're at, right, where she's at now. Currently with the classification, the job descriptions are with us, and we are having our legal counsel review them. She has completed, started collecting and analyzing some survey data based on how she thinks the job descriptions are going to turn out. So she will not finalize the compensation until the job descriptions are finalized. So we still have a couple of weeks out, I'm assuming, with a legal counsel review. At that point, any comments back received will be provided to Shelley with Bryce. She'll make appropriate changes. It'll be provided to our department managers, and they'll be addressing it, reviewing it with their staff. And hopefully by next month we should have an update to include some compensation. So that's just an update.
What period of time do the employees have to respond to that?
I do not recall what the scheduled window was, but I'm sure it'd be appropriate to where the staff would be able to read it, have some time, and then provide comments accordingly.
Okay.
LaRue, could you elaborate a little bit on the first bullet point on the management staff work with CalPERS to evaluate different payment options
Sure.
towards the pension liability? What are your thoughts and where are you
So,
possibly headed with that?
right, so months back, we presented some options when we were preparing our emergency fund on repaying our unfunded accrued liability. We've been working with CalPERS. We've had an actuarial report dated, I think, from last year. We're trying to see if there's any further or more updated information. And the idea is to present those tables back to you guys. Look at options on how we want to address accrued or unfunded accrued liability of about $16 million right now. There's also options into trusts that we can put them in. So we're just getting our information together. Our payment isn't due until July. So the intent is to come back next month with some options and some direction to how we want to tackle the monies.
Did our budget for this current fiscal year that ends June 30th, did it include any additional payments against the UAL?
It did not.
It didn't, okay. Okay, are you,
Future budgets will be prepared according to how we move forward or the direction of the board from next month's meeting.
so at this point, no plan to bring to the board a proposal to make additional payments, unbudgeted, but additional payments based on?
I do intend to bring an additional payment, a request for an additional payment. It's not in our approved budget. We do
Right.
have funds for it. So I think it would be acceptable to make that payment. That's something that the board would have a decision to make.
Okay, so it's likely to be agendized next month, May or?
Definitely.
Okay, great.
Don't forget, that is a 7% cost on that
No, I know.
you know, it's a huge cost, and I think we really need to hammer down and get a proper payment schedule set forth once we have the actuarials in place, so we can make that decision, and whether it's gonna be a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year pay down, but at 7%, you can figure that out on 1.6 million. That is a substantial amount of money.
We are currently on a 20-year. Would you like to come back with 3, 5, 10? Or would you leave it up to staff to present some options, or is there anything in particular you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think just agendizing, you know, something that for potential early payment, or I think forget the term in ADP, additional, I forget what they call it, but when you make an additional payment against your UAL, yeah, I think agendizing that, let us look at the data, you know, and I think you guys should have some recommendations on what you think is a reasonable approach to that, and whether it's a, you know, policy-based one that's systematic for the year's future, or a one-time, you know, payment, at least for this year, and we kind of address it on a year-to-year basis. You know, that's up to you guys how you want to do it, but I definitely think we should get something on the board to consider some sort of payment against the UAL.
Yeah, I'm just looking, well, we're getting in the bank at less than 2%, and it's costing us 7%. You know, those are, I mean, when you got a 5% difference, I mean, that's quite a bit of money if we can afford to do it, and that's why we need to have this discussion.
Yeah, back to your question, LaRue, for me, it's helpful to have a couple of, like 2 or 3 scenarios, like an aggressive, like a 5, 10,
moderate,
15, or whatever you think the right spread is.
That'll be fine.
Time period to pay it off, right? Because I think.
Right.
I think what Lane, I think what you're suggesting is the sooner the better, probably is the case. It's a question of how that might affect other priorities we may have.
It depends on what our reserve levels, what we're comfortable with living with, what our reserve levels are, and, you know, look at the long-term financial picture of the district. Because, you know, we did it in North Tahoe PD, we just paid it off, but it wasn't that much money. Here, this is substantial, and it'll only increase, you know, with the benefit packages that our employees have and our actuarials, and we need to see that.
So I did bring up last time we did the aggressive 1 year, 5, 10, 15.
Yeah.
So I'll bring those back, and if there's anything additional I think that might be interesting or that you consider, I'll include that.
Great.
Right, good, thank you.
Any additional questions on the report?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Board of Directors comments.
like, I guess,
Director Tussin, go ahead.
I guess this could have been questions for the GM report also. I'm just curious, have we heard anything from the SEED folks on the solar project?
I haven't reached out to them since the last board meeting. I did prior to that. I have received nothing. I did talk to another area general manager that's reached out to him, and they're non-responsive to him as well.
I mean, I think that we're an ideal location for a solar project. And I guess at a certain point, we gotta, the seed opportunity with them doing the kind of groundwork and the feasibility at no cost to us, unless we choose to do it, was great, but I think we're getting what we paid for, which is nothing.
Right.
And so at a certain point, I'd like to see perhaps staff, on our dime, get some quotes on what the feasibility of a solar project on the site would be.
At the town, we've done a similar thing. We have the seed folks came out and gave us some initial information. And then there's another consultant we were working on who is doing a building energy efficiency audit.
Okay.
Identifying opportunities to improve, change out lighting to LED and other things like that to reduce the overall electrical load on our facility. They also have experience in solar though, so we had them look at the information, the skeleton level information that the seed consultant provided, do a kind of a QA on that.
So you got some feedback from Seed. We've gotten nothing,
No,
right?
after we initiated the agreement with SEED, I had a conversation with, I think it was a consultant they used to identify some parcels that they could look at.
Right.
Some areas where we could utilize some roofs for potential space. He stated he was going to contact me with an update, received nothing. I reached out to him a month, I think a couple weeks after that, and then a month total after that, received no response. I emailed, phone calls. I did eventually get a hold of him, and we had the conversation over the phone. He said he would get back to it, and then I haven't heard anything then. I have been reached out. There have been companies reaching out to do solar projects, so I have no matters, no
I
concerns reaching out to
gotta
them.
stop this for a second. Is that camera still going, I hope? Because this went blank.
The battery, I let the battery get down to 10%, see how long it lasts.
Okay.
And I plugged it in, and I don't think I think the circuit goes through the battery, so the recharge didn't keep up.
Okay,
So-
good. I just want to make sure we're still being recorded.
Yeah,
during
we
public
lost
session.
a couple seconds, so I switched out the battery.
No problem. Okay, go ahead.
So my point on that, I think there's if we as the agency are interested in evaluating solar, there's a couple of fundamental ways we could look at it more closely. One is to continue to communicate with one of these design-build type companies, which is effectively what the SEED program is, and there's dozens of others out there, or hire a consultant with expertise in solar who's not trying to sell us solar panels at the end, who's just trying to give us good technical advice on the feasibility of solar, which I have a higher level of trust in, just because.
They're not a salesman.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're giving us an honest evaluation, and any return on investment calculations are going to be not potentially skewed optimistically because someone wants to sell a solar project at the end of the analysis. So I think my suggestion is if we wanted, as an agency, to look at this a little more closely, I think if the SEED folks pop back up again,
Right.
we'd keep talking to them, but in parallel, we could bring someone in that's an expert in solar that isn't trying to sell a solar panel.
Shall we
at the
put
end
that
of
on the, for no more
Right.
discussion here, shall we put that on the agenda for next month to discuss that?
Yeah.
Because we really shouldn't have this
Yeah,
discussion.
it's
It's
a
not
pretty
a-
substantive discussion on
yeah.
an item not on the agenda,
Yeah.
and it sounds like
Right.
there's an interest, so I would.
Let's do this. Let's
Just
cut,
put it on the
let's
agenda.
cut it right now. Let's bring it back and, with more information.
And could you make it relatively generic in terms of energy stuff? I think Dan's discussion of efficiency as well as solar as well as possibly biomass, opportunities for energy projects, you know, something for us to discuss and what we might want to, you know, have you guys incorporate into a budget.
Okay,
That'd be great.
okay, thank you.
There's another thing too that everybody's overlooking, like the building across from the hospital, if they had run solar tubes.
We really can't
I
be
know.
discussing it. We got it on the
I'll talk to
agenda,
Lou
we
about
got it
it.
on the agenda. You know, this is not, let's do it at that point.
All right.
Did you have any further discussion?
I was just going to share with the board that I was approached by Tykert. Again, they were checking in on the road project, but also just, again, putting out feelers for, you know, whether or not the agency, you know, how firm we were in our decision to reject the opportunity for them to extend mining operations that way. And my comment to him was that we were pretty firm about that. So just thought I'd let you guys know that they still want more land.
Well,
They haven't-
until they come to us,
You got a phone call as well?
yeah. Okay, good, that shouldn't be a discussion. Okay, Director Cox, you got any board comment here?
The only thing I can say in regards to this solar is that it's all about using our land, and, you know, this question still remains about storage and the utilization of solar, you know, coming from a storage facility, and I'm just not all that keen on it right now.
Okay, we'll have something possibly next month on it. Director Northrop?
Well, I was gonna mention, but you said not to, but there's building design that can use solar tubes facing the light and shiny lining, and you could literally light a building through any daylight time and save a hell of a lot of money on electricity.
Okay. Did you have any other comment on Board of Director comments?
That's good to
Okay.
know.
Director Wilkins? My only comment was, there again, I think as far as the operation of the sanitation agency here and the transparency that we're showing forth is excellent. The financials work was exceptional. I want to compliment your staff on getting that done, and I think anything we can do to be more transparent to the public as far as what we're doing here, we should do. So with that comment, I'm going to close the public hearing and go to close. Okay, let's let the record reflect there is no action taken in closed session. And at this time, I would call for a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
Director
So
Northrop
moved.
Director Northrop makes the motion, Director Cox seconds it. Any further discussion? And I'll ask for a roll call. Roll call, Dale Cox.
Yes.
A roll call, Director Tresson.
Yes?
Director Northrop.
Yes.
Director Wilkins.
Yes.
President Lewis. Yes. With that, meeting is adjourned.